K-State Culturally is virtual programming centered on celebrating, uplifting, and educating the Wildcat community through the lens of communities of color connected or affiliated with Kansas State University.
All right, so let me start off by saying that this interview is part of K-State Culturally Programming hosted by the K-State Alumni Association. Today we will talk about why alumni chose to serve their time. So hello, my name is Jordan Peyton, pronouns she, her, hers, and today I will be interviewing Nabeeha, Kazi, Hutchins, and Mako Miller. Would you please introduce yourselves to the audience, tell us your name, pronouns, and where you currently are in your career?
Sure, I can get started. My name is Nabeeha Kazi Hutchins, and I'm living in Washington, D.C., she, her, and work for a nonprofit called Kaboom, heading up their programs work, and also founded an international development agency here in Washington, D.C. Class of 1996, School of Journalism and Mass Communications, and also majored in political science.
Hello, everyone. I'm Mako Miller. Pronouns are she, her, hers. And I'm currently located in the Kansas City metro area. I work for the Kauffman Scholars Program. It's a scholarship program through the Kauffman Foundation here in Kansas City. And I'm the career services manager. So I have the opportunity of doing all the career and professional development for the scholars and alumni of our program. And I graduated in 2004, also in the journalism, mass communications, and a minor in leadership studies.
Thank you so much for introducing yourselves. So let's go ahead and start with a couple questions about your work in the nonprofit sector. So you're both very experienced people. You've done a lot in your lives towards the nonprofit sector. So when you were choosing to attend K-State for your undergrad, did you ever see yourself going into the nonprofit sector?
So I'll go first, I guess. So like, to be honest, I don't even think I knew what nonprofit was or that it even existed, like it was a thing. So I'm a first generation college student, so I'm not sure if I was even like thinking more about the type of work I would be doing after college, or just getting to college and through college in general was more of my priorities, I guess, at the time as an undergrad. So even the whole concept of like nonprofit wasn't something I knew much about. And I studied journalism only because I was really involved in newspaper and yearbook in high school, and you have to declare something. I thought you had to say like what your major was, because that's the first question they ask you is, what's your major? And so I chose journalism because I was just so familiar with it. And so, you know, I thought maybe I'd work at a newspaper or, you know, some type of, you know, media outlet, but never did nonprofit cross my mind.
Yeah, similar for me. You know, I wasn't intentional about what sector I wanted to work in. For me, it was much more about knowing that I wanted to make a difference. I grew up in the international development arena, born in Pakistan, home is Mexico. I traveled a lot, even before coming to K-State. And so just the idea of continuing to make a difference is, you know, just part of my family's legacy. So serving and supporting communities to enable better lives and better outcomes was embedded in me from a very early time. I was undecided, and I know we'll get to that hopefully a little bit later, but coming in undecided perhaps gave me a little bit more flexibility to explore and take classes and engage in experiences, while knowing that at the end of the day, I wanted to make a difference, whatever it was going to be. And eventually, you know, I got on the path that I am now.
Thank you so much. So what motivated you to make the decision to enter the nonprofit sector, and what's keeping you motivated to stay?
So For me, like I said, I wasn't necessarily seeking to work in the nonprofit sector. So this was definitely not intentional, but due to some contacts and my network that I had built during my time at K-State, actually when I was an admissions representative, I was able to connect with other admissions reps at other institutions and kind of created a network. And from that network, and then through my master's program, I was able to connect with someone at Kauffman Scholars. And so that's kind of how I fell into the work there. I wasn't familiar with the Kauffman Foundation. I'm not from Kansas City. I'm originally from Wichita, Kansas. And so I didn't know much about Mr. Kauffman, the founder of the foundation. And so, but now that I see the focus behind like equity and education that we're doing with our program, I'm such a big proponent now and a fan of nonprofits like the Kauffman Foundation and Kauffman Scholars and what they're doing. The fact that the focus is working to close the opportunity gaps in education, and the focus isn't on making a profit it's really wonderful. Like, what Nabeeha was talking about with service and helping others, like I just never thought like that was me, but just doing the work, I've become really passionate about it. And so we can truly focus on the students and the communities that we're serving. And that's what keeps me motivated to stay. And so I think about going into corporate spaces eventually, but then like I take a step back and think about how much difference I feel like I'm making in the work that we're doing with Kauffman Scholars. And so I don't know if I'm ready to transition out of nonprofit. I really love that we can just focus on our students and in that work and serving them and supporting them through their college journey and even after graduation as young professionals. So that's really what just motivates me. And even just like 1 or 2 emails I get a year from a scholar or an alum that says, thanks for, hosting that event, or, thank you for meeting with me for 30 minutes to talk about career development. Like that's what really keeps me motivated in the work, and is just something I have a passion for now. That is something I never originally thought about when I was an undergrad at K-State.
Yeah, I love what Mako mentioned is, what's keeping her in this sector and what got her started. And I probably have similar reasons as to why I'm remaining. I actually didn't start in the nonprofit sector. I started in the private sector, working for Fleischman Hillard, which is one of the world's leading public relations communications firms. And a large percentage of their programs, their clients are from the private sector. And they do have a healthy base of associations and nonprofits. And it was really interesting going into cause-related work, into movement-related work, into coalition-related work from a private sector lens, because I learned so much and also realized what are some of the efficiencies and unique assets and skills and expertise that the privite sector can bring to bear. I perhaps was not acutely aware of that until I left the private sector space. And I still work with a lot of private sector partners. So as I transitioned from more corporate work into international development work, heavily on the global malnutrition space, global hunger, women's rights, child development. Right now with my role with Kaboom, we are focused on ensuring that every child has access to play, access to quality play spaces. And all of that sounds, in one way, oh, that's all really important work. It's, even with the education piece, access to education, access to learning opportunities that Mako is leading with her organization. But the part that keeps me in, it's not so much about what is the solution or what is the program. It's just that nonprofits and nonprofits' ability to convene a range of sectors and a range of thought partners allow us to lift up what are the systemic injustices that have continued to keep millions of children hungry, that have continued to keep millions of families from achieving prosperity, that have kept millions of kids from accessing play spaces, which is fundamental to childhood. And if we look at those root causes, even the disparities in education and learning, I think it's a nonprofit sector that can lift up the social injustices that are at the root of this. And certainly while the programs are critical and it's important to have those, I think it's speaking truth to power that the nonprofit sector is better poised than anyone else to do. And that's what keeps me in it.
Thank you so much. So looking back at everything that you've done, are there any types of skills that you recommend people having when they're thinking about entering that kind of work?
All right, I'll go first. You know, I think the biggest thing is, you know, keeping an open mind. I think that's really important. It's not really a skill. I would say it's more about mindset. And the other pieces are being great collaborators, right? So much, I think, at least when I was at K-State, we were working on team projects and being involved in team building and team initiatives in extracurricular work. But I suspect that that is even more elevated now because that's the way of work. You know, even in the nonprofit sector, you could have a great mandate and a great organization, but in order to have scaled impact, you need to collaborate. You need to be able to work with different perspectives, perspectives that might be friendly, perspectives that may not be friendly to your mission, but you realize that it's about bridging these divides. And if we're going to do right by people, we have to figure out how to work together. So the collaboration ability and openness to other perspectives is really important. And then the third piece that I would say is be an outstanding communicator. Writing skills, you know, people underestimate that. I would say 90% of my job is writing. And you have to be a great writer to be able to put forward your ideas and make your calls to action compelling. And, you know, a good public speaker. I know that's not for everybody, but I think writing is really key. So you don't have to be a journalism major to take those classes. I think every single person needs to be honing in on their writing skills. It forces you to think in a very strategic way and to articulate what needs to be articulated, especially in the nonprofit sector where there's urgency across a whole host of issues.
I wanted Nabeeha to go first because I knew she would tackle it so well. I was like, I'm not going to have to say a lot about this because I know she's going to say such great things about the types of skills. Because for me, I wasn't, like I said, I didn't think about it. And just with her experience, you know, with, you know, working in nonprofit and starting one, it's just, I think just the ability to collaborate, like she said, was, I feel like it's been really essential in the work I've done, because I know that I wouldn't be able to connect my scholars and alumni with the networks that I have unless I was collaborating with these individuals, you know, throughout Kansas City. And so just with internal groups, both internal and external, I have to be able to collaborate and just be authentic. Like that's a big piece in nonprofit. And being able, I think, understanding your communities that you're serving. We see a lot of disparities in the nonprofits and then versus the communities that they're serving. So just being able to build those relationships, I think there's a lot of relationship building, because I really think, you know, people don't necessarily care what you have to say unless they know that you care about who they are and, you know, where they live, and just having that ability to build those relationships, I think, are really key with nonprofits. You know, there's a lot of creativity and strategy involved too in being a nonprofit, which I think, which is within any work. But the big piece is that passion for that mission-driven type of work, because that's really what drives what you're doing is the mission. And I'm finding a lot about that now and helping us kind of revamp our diversity, equity, inclusion mission statement for the Kauffman Foundation. So understanding that mission piece, I think, is key. But yeah, the good communication skills, there's definitely a lot of writing. I will attest to that 100%. I don't know how many emails I write in a day, so just having that clear communication skills and knowing how to, formulate your ideas clearly has been really critical for me in the work that I do. So yeah, I just think being creative too, in terms of you're possibly like resource constrained in some aspects in nonprofits, because sometimes there may not be those resources there or the funding to do the work that you want to do, depending on the nonprofit. So understanding that those resources might not be there. And so how can you be creative in creating opportunities and still being able to support the work that you're doing?
Thank you. So is there anything that you learned specifically throughout your time at K-State that you've used in your personal and professional spheres?
Came from my K-State upbringing. But some of the things that come to mind that I carry with me throughout both my professional and personal life is the human element matters. And, I will tell you, I was nervous about coming to K-State from Mexico. My mother went to K-State, so he's a diehard K-Stater. That's kind of what led us all on this journey. I'm one of 5 in my family who graduated from K-State, and very, very proud of that. But I was the first after my father to come to the university. And it's a big place. And in Kansas, coming from Mexico City, that's, you wonder how that's gonna pan out. And the piece that I remember from day one, from even before school had started, because I'd arrived 2 weeks before, is how I was made to feel as one individual who was part of this greater campus. And I felt special and cared for, and like my voice mattered, and to help me and support me. And I've carried that throughout, because we could have the biggest initiatives of the world. We could put out these big goals, which are the sustainable development goals. We could set out these commitments to tackle inequities and injustices in our country. But what it comes down to make that change is the human element piece of it. What's happening, as Mako said, what's happening in communities? Are we being responsive to needs? Are we really addressing what a family, what a neighborhood, what a community needs and wants? Are we creating that sense of belonging and ownership of the work and the progress? And so that's something that I carry with me day in and day out throughout. And then my second one was the courage to ask. The piece that stands out for me at K-State is no one ever said no to me. And it's not that I was ever demanding, it's whenever I needed help, if I ever wanted to do something, get involved in something, meet people, be a part of something, it was always a yes. And I think that's so important, to be able to ask and for a response to be yes from your peers or from faculty or administrators. It's just part of the culture. And I think when you do that in a university setting and you have the experience of what happens with the yes, you feel more bold and courageous to make the big asks in your career and in your personal life as advocates for the communities you're working with, for your family, for your friends, and so on and so forth. So those would be my 2 things, the human element and the courage to ask.
Yeah, there's definitely that sense of belonging and community aspect. Being a first generation student of color, I went to a pretty diverse high school, and then going to K-State, it was a culture shock. It was a racial culture shock for me. And so I went up for my first campus visit all by myself, and I didn't have an appointment, and they just made me feel so welcome. I think the initial reason I even chose K-State was because I had gone to journalism camp there while I was in high school. And even in the summers when there's like really no students there, I still felt welcomed, and it felt like this was the right place for me. So I definitely think what I learned both personally and professionally was that importance of the relationship building and reaching out to people and encouraging others, because that was like put on me. That was someone reached out to me from the leadership studies department. I got a phone call in my dorm room and they said, "Hey, you want to work in our office?" And I, hadn't even thought about it. And the fact that someone saw something in me and reached out and encouraged me to do something like that, that's something I probably would have never done. And so that has encouraged me to do the same thing, is that when I see other individuals, like, my peers, that I'm like, you should totally apply for this position, or I saw this great job, I think you'd be a great fit. But just making sure that I'm like passing that along and encouraging others to see something in themselves that maybe they don't see themselves. And so that was my experience as an undergrad, which I was very fortunate to have. And so that relationship building and just making sure that I'm encouraging and trying to help empower others to see those opportunities out there that maybe they didn't necessarily think about for themselves. So that was a big piece. And I think it comes down to, I love it when people are like, "I know you went to K-State and that's a really big school, but do you happen to know this person?" And I'm like, you know what? I actually do know that person. And so I think that's why I love it, in that it really does feel like a family, even though it's that, it's a big school with that, small school feel, is, what Dr. Bosco always said. And when we were out recruiting students, and it truly is, like, that is the truth by far. So yeah, I definitely think it's that, those relationships, but then making sure that you're reaching out to others and encouraging them and pulling out those things and making sure that you're kind of passing along opportunities and making sure that you're informing others and making them recognize their potential. So yeah, that was a big piece for me, and something I've tried to keep in my personal and professional life.
Thank you so much for sharing a little bit about y'all's time at K-State. So let's talk a little bit about y'all's goals. So have your goals changed throughout your careers? And can you tell us what they were when you first graduated K-State and what they are now?
Yeah, I think my goal graduating from K-State was to get a job. If I can be perfectly honest.
Amen.
Yes, and so we achieved that, didn't we? We achieved that, and I would say, I'm joking about this. It wasn't just about any job, right? A job I could feel proud of. I am the daughter of immigrants, so family is very important to me, and making them proud is also very important to me. That's a blessing and a burden, by the way. Sometimes you're like, oh man, I just want to do it on my own. But all of that factors in is having had a job that I could feel proud of, and that aligned with what I studied and where I could bring my whole self to, right? And so that initially, right out of school, was the goal. And as I said, to make a difference. I think where I shouldn't say change, where I've evolved is I've realized, to my point earlier, it's not just about the program, right? It's not just about, are we able to deliver vaccines? Are we able to deliver food? Are we able to offer critical services so women can give birth to their children in a safe way and not die when they're giving life to another human being? for now, it's almost evolved to a point of impatience of saying, well, why are we still dealing with all these things? And so the undertone, the undercurrent, the systemic reasons why we still have these things going on, why so many kids, as I mentioned, are hungry, why kids don't have access to play, and so on and so forth, has perhaps made me even more aware that there is something that we are not addressing, that we are not calling out, that we have to, because a Band-Aid only stays on for so long. And so it's harder now. The work is harder, but I think I'm probably more mature and stronger in my belief that we have to stay the course, but we also have the courage. We have to have the courage, and we have to have the strength to call out what is underlying so many of the injustices that we see in the world today.
Yeah, for me, so my goals when I first graduated from K-State, so I worked for the institution actually for 3 years, just right after I graduated. So I just really wanted to do like a kick-ass job at my, my first professional job, like out of college. And I wanted to make my parents proud. Like I said, I'm first generation. My mother came from Japan, and my father, who is Black, graduated from high school and joined the military. And then I have an older brother. He didn't go to college either. So this was like a new thing for all of us. And so I just wanted to make them proud. They supported me a lot through college. It was a struggle just, like financially supporting me. So I wanted to do a really good job. So my goal in my first job was just to communicate with students and families across the state of Kansas and help them make the best college decisions, because for me, I didn't have a lot of choices. And I didn't know how to even make those choices, making informed decisions about college, because I didn't know the process. So it was, when I was talking with students and families, it wasn't about, whether that was K-State or another institution, but just being informed about the schools that you're looking at. And it was, like I said, it was helping them and students and their families make informed choices. And when I started working in higher education, my goal was about making access to college easy, helping remove some of those barriers. And so being that first generation student, I knew that what the struggle was. Like, I experienced it myself. So when I worked in admissions at K-State, and then I was also doing that for a community college here in Kansas City, my goal was about helping students and families through that process, answer their questions, be their advocates. And so, that was definitely my goal. And then when I started working for Kauffman Scholars, in career development, my goals are kind of shifted a little bit in terms of helping scholars and alumni build career capital and to make that career journey more equitable for them, and to help them build those networks that help grow like that social and cultural capital we all know lead to social mobility, financial mobility. And so my goals have been really about helping, really students of color and their families. And I thought about going back to higher education, actually, because I have such a passion for working with first generation students. And I even taught a class at the community college. It was like a college 101 course, and just telling students like how to navigate the college landscape. They just got there was really something, a goal of mine is really about removing those barriers and making those processes more equitable for marginalized communities and students and families, because I don't want them to have to go through what I went through. So that was really something that's always been at the back of my mind as I do my work.
Thank you so much for sharing y'all's goals. So when you think about goal setting and trying to think about where you want to be in the future, how do you factor in the impact you want to make with your goals and setting those?
Yeah, I start with impact. What is the impact that I want to make personally? What is the impact that my team wants to make? What is the impact that my organization wants to make? And I think you have to start with that impact to then inform what your goals should be, who you need to work with, how you're going to approach your work, how you're going to live your life, and so on and so forth. So I think for me, impact is the starting point, and then it's also the end point, right? To say, all right, does this plan, do these goals, does my action plan, will it deliver on the impact? And all along the way, how do I know if we're driving toward that or not? You know, you've got to have those checks throughout a process, whether that's throughout your life, throughout your career, throughout the course of a program. But Mako, I know you do this day in and day out at Kauffman, so can't wait to hear your perspective on this as well.
Yeah, it's really no different. I think, you know, working in nonprofit, that's a lot of what we think about is what is our impact. You know, now I know it plays a huge factor for me. I don't know if ever setting goals, I thought about that, but they're really intentional about it. I know with where I work with the Kauffman Foundation and Kauffman Scholars, and just personally now I think about that. I have a 4-year-old daughter and a lot of other small humans in my friends and family circle that I want to make sure that the goals I'm making are leaving this place better for them to grow up in. And now when I think about goals, I think about the impact definitely on race and diversity and equity and inclusion. And I think about how, if what I'm doing am I being an anti-racist? Am I being equitable? So definitely those terms were not a part of my lexicon as a 18 to 21-year-old. I was more about like, how do I make sure I pay my rent, and how do I make sure that I have food? Those are my goals. But now that I'm in a place where I can now really think about the impact of things, for me, I've really had this journey of learning about myself from a racial standpoint and learning about that history. So really it's about that impact on BIPOC individuals, so Black, Indigenous, people of color, and how can I make sure that my work is centered around that and is equitable and intentionally being anti-racist in my actions and what I'm doing. So yeah, that's definitely something now I'm like, okay, what's the end goal? What's the, like, kind of thinking, what's the why? First, kind of backwards thinking. And so what's my impact going to be by doing X, Y, Z? Like, what are the potential outcomes of the work I do? What's that going to look like on the back end? So yeah, for sure, really have to think about that in the work that we do.
Yeah, I want to lift up something that you've just raised that I think is so spot on. I mean, certainly all of the things that are really critical as we look at structural racism, as we look at the impact of so many decisions and investments in the way we do our work on BIPOC communities and so on and so forth. I think also this question on impact of the organization, that can always be seen and only framed in a positive light. And what I am seeing is intentionality. I mean, at Kaboom, we've just gone through this as part of organizational goal setting. What are the disruptions? What are the unintended consequences of something good that we're trying to achieve? We have to think through. Does this exacerbate inequities? Does this put unjust pressure on certain communities in terms of the way that we're working, even if it is for good? And I would tell you that for far too long, and I've been touching the nonprofit sector in the nonprofit sector now for a little over 2 decades. And those conversations have not been at the forefront. In many ways, it's if you do good, then it's all good. And there are plenty of examples, and it's not out of malice, is where your intention to do good has actually done harm. And my master's is in public health, and we follow the do no harm philosophy. And I think we have to be very honest that even if we are in the social justice nonprofit space, we have to ask ourselves, are we doing harm in the way we're working and how we're engaging with communities and the solutions we're bringing forward? And that requires honest conversation internally and the commitment to make sure that we are aware and that we solve for that. So I really appreciate what you raised, Mako, on this point.
Thank you. No, I'm so glad you added to that, because yeah, that unintentional piece is huge. If we're not thinking about the unintentional outcomes of things, and yeah, being honest with ourselves, like you mentioned, it could really make the problems even worse. And I've seen that, just like you talked about, I've definitely seen that happen. So yeah, that impact piece, Jordan, I'm so glad you're asking about that. It's really, really critical. So hopefully, you know, what, you know, Nabeeha and I have shared will hopefully folks going into that sector will help them think about those pieces.
Thank you so much. So now that we've heard a bit about your lives, careers, and goals, let's talk a little bit about how you got involved with the Alumni Association. So when did you know you wanted to give back to K-State through your involvement with the Alumni Association?
Yeah, so as soon as Dr. Elmore like reached out and she said, you need to do this. Like, okay, no, I always love coming back to Manhattan. Any excuse I have to come back and visit with current students and, you know, some of my colleagues that I had at K-State, and, you know, my peers that I went to school with. So I had a great undergraduate experience, and I want to know how my experience can help those behind me. So that's kind of why I like try to reach back and give back to K-State through my involvement with the Multicultural Alumni Council. As you know, like I said, as a first generation, you know, student of color at a predominantly white institution, I think it's partly my responsibility. I know it's not like, you know, full on Mako has to do all of that, but I feel like it is, you know, partially my responsibility to take that time to be involved as a multicultural alum and see how I can serve other alumni like myself and current students like me. And so I didn't know MAC even existed. So my goals related to DEI, like I talked about in your previous question, Jordan, definitely align with K-State and the Multicultural Alumni Council. So it was like this perfect fit where I get to do that type of work, but I get to do it with my alma mater, and I get to talk with students, and because that's my passion. I mean, Dr. Elmore will tell you, like, I am always like, Jessica, I need to talk to students when I'm on campus. Like, that is what I want to do, because I just want to connect with them and hear about their experiences and how it's going for them at K-State, because there's a huge time difference between when I was a student there and being a student now, and I know things have changed. So I just had a good experience. And I think even if you didn't have a good experience, I think reaching back and talk, because there's probably other students just like you that may be struggling with something going on. And so being able to talk with them and say, like, how did you get through it, and lend advice and kind of be that mentor, I guess, is something that I really just truly love about K-State. So it's kind of my way to say, like, thank you to the community by volunteering my time and giving back.
Yeah, well, for me, I think it was probably from day one without even really knowing about it, because there are people who just don't let you go. Amy Button-Renz doesn't let you go. Pat Bosco didn't let you go, right? And they're ongoing, right? Faculty members, Linda Putney from JMC, Emiset Kisangani, who was my advisor on poli-sci, never let me go. And so I think, you know, that played a big factor in, from the very beginning, feeling like this was my place. And it was not going to end in May of 1996 when I graduated. There's also the reality of, I have a huge feeling of being indebted to K-State, because it gave my family the opportunities that it has. My father came from Pakistan in the late 60s to pursue his PhD in the College of Ag, and that completely changed the trajectory of our lives. I was born there, so I am a, yes, US citizen, but coming from strong international roots when I came to K-State. And there's always this piece of, my family gave up so much and sacrificed so much for us to have the lives that we have, for us to achieve and learn and have access to a quality education and a safe learning environment. And K-State provided that. So I always remember my roots and who made so many things possible for my family to be where they are, and K-State is part of that. So for me, I was going to be involved from day one, and you know, it's partly a piece of feeling that it's my way of giving back, but a lot of gratitude and my desire. You know, this fundamental, as I mentioned, this fundamental piece of me, that the reality is that my family is K-State. You know, we look different. We're minority. You know, as Mako mentioned, there weren't a lot of Pakistani, South Asian, brown, Black community members on campus when I was there, and certainly not a lot of international students. But at the end of the day, I felt the sense of belonging, and I still do. And I want to make sure that as I remain involved with the Alumni Association, the campus, that others see that. I feel very proud to be the second woman of color to chair the Alumni Association board. And it makes me, and I'm born in a foreign country. I suspect I may be the first one to be a foreign-born chair of the Alumni Association. And I think I'm incredibly proud of that. I think it also reinforces that these are important values that the university has, of this creating the space for everyone to achieve and prosper. And that when you come here, to your point, Mako, it may not have been for some an amazing experience. It may have been an amazing experience for others, but all of us have this place that we call home, right? And so that's what's the driving force for me to be involved.
Thank you so much. So throughout your time giving back to the community, is there anything that stood out to you when you were working with K-State and the Alumni Association?
Yeah, I would say the network that K-State provides. I'll tell you time and time again, and sometimes it's just a surprise, you know, of individuals seeing where I got my undergrad from, and they say, oh, I'm a K-State alum. And it's great, right? You just automatically have this familyhood because there's that common connection. It happens a lot more with K-State than my other alma mater, believe it or not, where I got my master's degrees. And it just feels good, you know, that network of support and safety. And it's occurred time and time again in the most amazing and surprising ways. And so many doors have been opened because of that connection.
Yeah, what's definitely stood out, like I mentioned, it's always just getting the opportunity to meet with current K-State students. And when I'm on campus and we have it on the agenda for when we're doing our multicultural alumni council meetings, that we're going to be out on campus and we're not going to just be sitting in the Alumni Association conference room meeting all day. Like, I want to get out, because I'm like, I didn't drive like 2 hours from Kansas City to like sit in a room. Like, I love you guys, but I want to connect with students. So those are the moments that really stand out to me is being able to connect with them and listen to their stories and let them know, like, hey, you know, here's my information, connect with me if you're coming to the Kansas City area after graduation or you're looking for an internship. So yeah, those are always my favorite moments. I mean, you can definitely tell, like, I just have a passion working with students and being able to just be somebody else in their network that can help them as a resource. Because I had that, like, when I got to campus, the people in the leadership studies department looked at me saying, like, people just don't let go of you. Like, pretty much everybody in leadership studies was like, hey, you know, why don't you like work for K-State after you graduate? And so that even like gave me another perspective and kept me connected. So yeah, I mean, it's just knowing that that was, you know, helpful for me as an undergrad. And so those are the moments that really stand out when I'm, you know, back on campus and volunteering that time with the Multicultural Alumni Council.
Thank you so much. So last question, if an alumni wants to give back to the K-State community, what would you say to motivate them to reach out?
I'd say just do it. You know, it should be a no-brainer. I always say that the strength of our university is our people, our students, our faculty, administrators, and certainly our alumni. Like, it all needs to work together, and we can't have a successful, vibrant, growing environment without us being tight with each other and having each other's back. And I think especially in this time where there are challenges around higher ed, where we are in a crisis, right? Where students are wondering, am I going to get a job? What network should I be a part of? You know, those are all really important roles that the Alumni Association can help play and that alumni can play. So part of this is also giving back, right? And not just about funding, absolutely, you know, write those checks, but it's also about time and care. And that's what stands out for me in my experience with the Alumni Association is, even if there is a financial contribution, these are individuals who've invested their time, right? To Mako's point, who want to go talk to students, who will pick up the phone when you call and say, do you have advice for me? Can you connect me to someone? And we need that network. We need that network. It is so critical to the health and vibrancy of our university. And so I would say, you know, absolutely, I think everyone, whether it was a great experience or not a great experience, everyone has something to offer. And the piece I think that you raised, Mako, I think it's so important is, if there were challenges for you as a student, don't write the university off. You know, this is a learning, growing place. And so think about the power that you might have, whether that was because you were a student of color or you didn't feel connected to your department or whatever it might be. As an alumni, you have a voice. You know, you can inform the way programs get done better, the way we act in a different way, and so on and so forth. So if you don't have a seat at the table, you can't make it better for others. That's what I've learned. So that's what I would say. Reach out to us and be part of it. Continue to be part of our community.
Yes, amen. It's easy if you had a great experience to talk to other students who are also having a great experience at K-State. It's the ones that are struggling and having, you know, they're struggling to connect. So yeah, I definitely, yeah, I love that. Like, don't write them off, because you don't want that experience for another student, do you? So use that voice to help put in, like, you know, either different programming and ways that will help students have a better experience at K-State. And so, you know, think about your K-State experience and know that there are hundreds of students just like you currently, you know, as undergrads. And what did you need as an undergrad or as a recent alum that you didn't have? And how can you provide that for another student or for another, you know, alum? And as an alum now, what do you need from K-State? So I think, you know, the motivation is, how can you enhance that or create that for another alum, like what's missing that you feel like, you know what, I think I can, that would motivate me to say, you know, maybe I could lend something to what the Alumni Association's doing to help other alumni. And so I would motivate a K-State alum to just think about that experience and think about what it is that made it great, that can even make it even greater for students, but then what was missing that you could say, you know what, I really could have utilized this in my undergrad, and I'm sure there are other students just like that could use that as well, and use that as the motivation to reach out to the Alumni Association and say, you know, I want to help, and I want to give of, you know, any of your resources, your time, finances, your connections, whatever that is. They'll definitely, you know, latch onto that and say that, and take advantage and say thank you for, you know, wanting to give back. And I think that's a really great opportunity to, you know, give back to the institution. So yeah, for sure, I echo everything. Like Nabeeha's over here talking, and I'm just over here like, yes, exactly. So I love that. Their experiences, even though, you know, they're different, it's all centered around just that passion and love that we have for K-State. And you can see definitely why we give back and we serve in the positions that we're in.
Thank you so much for spending time with us, for answering all of these questions, and spending time just like giving back to K-State in this sphere. So this interview is a part of the K-State Culturally, and you can see more interviews on the K-State Alumni Association website and Multicultural Alumni Council Facebook page. Thank you.
Thank you, and go Cats!